During an emergency situation, common sense suggests that the more bystanders that are present, the more likely you are to be helped. But according to research, this is wrong. The reasons why it may be incorrect were first suggested by John Daly and Bibb Latané, two social psychologists who thought about this issue after learning of a famous murder in New York City. In this tragic crime, a young woman, Kitty Genovese, was assaulted by a man in a location where many people could see and hear what was going on. Yet, despite the fact that the attacker continued to assault the victim for long, and even left and then returned to continue the assault later, not a single person reported the crime to the police. Daly and Latané raised a question. Common sense suggests that more number of witnesses in emergency, the more likely it is that someone will help. So why didn't it happen in the case of Kitty Genovese? Daly and Latané developed several possible explanations and then tested them in research. That is certainly a true classic of social psychology. Daly and Latané considered many possible explanations. Most promising one was that perhaps no one helped because all the witnesses assumed that someone else would do it. Daly and Latané referred to this as diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility. A principle suggesting that the greater the number of witnesses to an emergency, the less likely victims are to receive help. This is because each bystander assumes that someone else will do it. Over the years, additional research on prosocial behavior identified many other factors that determine how people respond to emergency situations. Huntsman and Plant suggest that race of the victim and the helper may play a role, with black victims less likely to receive help from white bystanders, especially if they are high in aversive racism. Understanding the bystander effect. 5 crucial steps in deciding to help or not. 1. Noticing or failing to notice that something unusual is happening. An emergency is obviously something that occurs unexpectedly, and there is no way to anticipate where it will take place or to plan how best to respond. If we are asleep, deep in thought, concentrating on something else, we may simply fail to notice that something unusual is happening. The passengers on Flight 93 saw the weapons of the hijackers and learned from the captain that the plane was being taken over by terrorists. In addition, they used their cell phones to learn of the other attacks, so they knew that something very terrible was occurring, and this made it easier for them to take action. They overpowered the 4 hijackers who tried to seize the plane and crash it into a public building in Washington. Instead, it crashed in a rural area of Pennsylvania, killing all on board. The passengers who took action in this emergency are viewed as heroes and heroines by people all over the world. 2. Correctly interpreting an event as an emergency. Even after we pay attention to an event, we often have only limited and incomplete information as to what exactly is happening. Most of the time, whatever catches our attention does not turn out to be an emergency and so does not require immediate action. It's quite possible that in the early morning when Kitty Genovese was murdered, her neighbors could not clearly see what was happening, even though they heard the screams and knew that a man and a woman were having a dispute. It could have just been a loud argument between them, or perhaps the couple were just joking with each other. Whenever potential helpers are not completely sure about what is going on, they tend to hold back and wait for further information. This tendency for an individual surrounded by a group of strangers to hesitate and do nothing is based on what is known as pluralistic ignorance. Because none of the bystanders knows for sure what is happening, each depends on the others to provide cues. 3. Deciding that it is your responsibility to provide help. In many instances, the responsibility for helping is clear. Firefighters take care of fires, police officers take charge when cars collide, and medical personnel deal with injuries and illnesses. If responsibility is not clear, people assume that anyone in a leadership role must take responsibility, for instance, adults with children, professors with students. As we have pointed out earlier, when there is only one bystander, he or she usually takes charge because there is no alternative. 4. Deciding that you have the knowledge and/or skills to act. Even if a bystander progresses and assumes responsibility, a prosocial response cannot occur unless the person knows how to be helpful. Some emergencies are sufficiently simple that almost everyone has the necessary skills to help. If someone falls on the road, most bystanders are able to help that person get up, but when a car breaks down, everyone won't be able to help as it requires the knowledge to do it. The best you can do is offer to call for assistance, making the final decision to provide help. Even if a bystander passes the first 4 steps in the decision process, help does not occur unless he or she makes the ultimate decision to engage in a helpful act. Helping at this final point can be inhibited by fears, often realistic ones, about potential negative consequences. In effect, potential helpers engage in cognitive algebra as they weigh the positive versus the negative aspects of helping. For example, people may hesitate to bring a person met with accident to hospital as they may get afraid that they will be accused of causing the accident and may have to pay for the bills, etc. That's all. If you have any doubts, ask Abhiram.